Black dragons are terrible, dangerously evil creatures. Honestly, the worst of the worst. They kill just for the sake of it, and torturing its meals is but a hobby to them. Blue dragons, on the other hand, are completely opposite while still remaining on the evil spectrum. You might actually be surprised by what you hear about them on this episode. Color is probably the easiest way to recognize a chromatic dragon. The problem with that, though, is that there are tons of creatures out there who might pretend to be a dragon when they are not. A wizard pretending to be a blue dragon would most certainly nail the color, but you could catch him on a myriad of other things that truly make a blue dragon. Things that a wizard who hasn't actually studied dragons wouldn't know. A dragon's color will also not help you recognize it if what you're looking at is a skeleton, or if you're looking at a Dracolich, for example. Knowing which breath weapon to expect can literally save your life. The biggest feature of a blue dragon is the big horn in the middle of its forehead. The biggest misconception, though, is that it is a single long horn. And this is where you can actually nail on the cross people who don't really know about blue dragons versus those who do. A blue dragon's horn will always have a second tip behind the first. Now, this is not merely an artistic depiction or a quirky feature of a specific dragon. No, this is how all blue dragons' horns look. If a dragon were to not have the second hidden tip on the back, then you might actually consider that a birth defect. Now, this is one of the few examples where the direction of D&D actually shifted during the editions, where you can actually see during the first and second edition that the dragon wasn't quite the same as it looks now. In fact, much of the design for the blue dragon shifted dramatically starting at third edition. See, all of the blue dragons have flat tails, like a crocodile does. Now, all of them do. This is something that you would not see on the earlier editions. Also, the ears are always particularly frizzled in the contemporary design, whereas in the earlier editions, you would show them looking like elf ears, which is of course not the case anymore. Now, none of these things would be seen on a skeleton, except for the horn, of course. If you saw a draconic skeleton with its horn, then you would be able to easily tell that it was indeed a blue dragon. But what if the horn was taken by an adventurer, or a hag, or a rival dragon? I mean, dragon horns can be very valuable. Well, then the only tail remaining would be its nostril. Indeed, a blue dragon nostrils are particularly discernible from all other dragons, especially on a skeleton. They are enormous and uncomfortably close to the eye sockets. This would be a guaranteed tell that this was a blue dragon. Though to be honest, the big hole where the horn was supposed to be should also be a pretty solid tell. The chin spikes are also always a good tell when you have a blue dragon in your hands. And you better be careful with those, because those are very dangerous. But now that we know how to tell them apart, let's talk about the type of dragon personally. What are they like, and where they live? Well, see, those questions are actually very much related, and that's because a lot of how the dragon acts and behaves is completely predicated on the biome it resides. Let me explain. A black dragon doesn't like to fly. Why? Because a black dragon is safe in the swamp. Flying takes it out of its ecosystem. Swamps are also typically not that big, and a flying black dragon would quickly find itself out of its own home. This is a similar problem that a red dragon might actually suffer if a red dragon were to, for example, fly in a single direction for 20 minutes. Then it would find itself actually far from the lava that it finds so comfortable. The biome dictates a lot of the actions of the dragon that resides within. Swamps are typically not that big, but are extremely dense. Ditto with forests. A large green dragon can claim a forest as its domain, but much of its power is concentrated on the ground floor. It can manipulate the plants and animals, it probably has slaves, but none of these things are useful to the green dragon if the green dragon is miles up into the air. If a different dragon were to attack the green dragon would want to be walking down in the thick of the forest, where it can actually use all of its powers. But see, this is where it gets interesting. Blue dragons reside on deserts, in arid badlands and such. The innate difference between the desert biome and the swamp or forest is that deserts are huge, and most of it is just empty. A large green dragon might be content with a few miles of forest, but a blue dragon would certainly not be content with merely a few miles of a desert. Forests have all kinds of food and secrets and vaults and dungeons, but a desert rarely has any. I mean, okay, it does, of course. You can probably find a lot of wealth hidden on a desert and dungeons and such, but such locations are very, very far apart. There are just less deserts than there are swamps or forests, but those deserts that do exist are huge, and not really much live in them. This makes it so that a single blue dragon can actually control an insanely big chunk of desert land and call it its lair. But how does the desert biome change the personality of the blue dragon? Well, unlike the swamp and the forest, which are unfriendly to flying, deserts are actually very friendly to flying. Blue dragons are probably the best flyers in the entire dragon kind. That's because all they do is fly. So much so, in fact, they can actually maintain their flight for days at a time, even while in combat. This is why adventurers say always that fighting a blue dragon is the most boring out of all of the creatures to hunt. That's because, finding a blue dragon might not be too hard, but that dragon will literally just soar in the sky for days, shooting lightning bolts at you until you die. If it does get close to the ground, then it will simply dig himself into the ground and rest, far away from your spells or blades. Let's not even mention the fact that the entire ground beneath you is probably trapped with specially made sinkholes. And let's also not even mention the fact that blue dragons are masters of the illusory terrain spell, so nothing that you actually see on the desert could be real. Point is, fighting a blue dragon is annoying, and it'll probably be a multiple day affair. Dragons are legendary creatures of magic, and they all have an incredible talent. Most do, at least. The legendary talent of the blue dragon is its patience. It will siege you for a week or more if that's what it takes. It literally doesn't care. This is why I was bothered with the beginning scene of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, where they had a blue dragon get bored after just a night of war. It didn't really feel in character, but I digress. The one caveat about blue dragons in this regard is that they will never back down. They don't run away unless they are on the cusp of death. They consider that as cowardly. A match to them is like a chess game with tactics and decisions, and a blue dragon loves making combat decisions that are brilliant and poses no risk to the dragon. You will typically see them perform ventriloquism and illusions to separate enemies or drive them towards their traps. Now, what's particularly interesting about blue dragons, and this is actually something that the monster manual doesn't actually tell you, is that they are actually very social creatures, and they might not be as evil as you might think them to be. The trick about living in the desert is that, like I mentioned before, a simple blue dragon can dominate an extremely large area. The problem is that there aren't many deserts, so what ends up happening is that multiple blue dragons actually end up congregating on the same deserts. Dragons are also lawful creatures, and like I said, fairly social, so they actually form communities within the desert with a designated leader. The leader, of course, will be the oldest and most powerful blue dragon, as you would expect. This elder dragon will be the suzerain of the desert, like an overlord. All the lesser dragons will pay homage to the suzerain blue dragon, and this suzerain will then settle any form of dispute that might happen within its domain. This might actually include territorial battles to even mating disputes. See, the mating process for blue dragons is quite elaborate, and it typically involves a draconic version of dating. The blue dragons exchange gifts between each other, sometimes food or treasures, and when the courtship goes well, they present their relationship to the other blue dragons in the area, like a form of celebration or announcement. And then the suzerain blue dragon will hear their announcement and give his blessing. Or not. But if he does, then and only then will the blue dragons mate. Infidelity is very rare within blue dragons, and the children that spawn out of a couple will be very well provided for and even loved by their parents. Blue dragons take extreme care for their eggs and will protect them with their lives. They never leave their eggs unattended either. blue dragons also seldom challenge the ruling of their suzerain. If they dislike the elder dragon that rules the desert, then they just typically leave to go find another desert. Now, when you actually hear all of this, it does paint an interesting picture of the society of blue dragons that kind of differs dramatically with what your perception, I would imagine, would be for chromatic dragons in general. Certainly opposite to what we talked about when we covered the black dragons. And none of this is actually on the monster manual, which is crazy to me. Thank you so much for watching the video. I would like to personally thank my Patreon supporters, Rukato Fan, Major Fail Gaming, Wyatt Curlin, Toby Oliver, Dylan Baker, Zach Powell, Casey Butler, and Meaty Ogre at Best for supporting me on Patreon at the $25 level. If you would like to support me as well, then please head on over to patreon.com/MrRhexx to support. You can also leave a like on the video if you really enjoyed it, a dislike if you didn't enjoy it, leave a comment below to tell me which dragon you want to hear about next, and if you can, please follow me on Twitter so that you can keep yourself updated to my shenanigans and when I'm uploading my next videos. Thank you again so much for watching. It's actually pretty fun. I just did a pretty big move. I moved from my old apartment to the new one, so I've been a little bit busy doing that, and that's why there was a time period without videos. But now that I'm back, now that I'm working, now that I have internet, I'm hoping to fill this next 2 or 3 weeks with tons and tons of content. So we're going to be releasing these dragon videos very fast now. So I appreciate your understanding, I appreciate the patience, and I will see you all on the next video. Bye-bye.